Right, let's get to the point here. Haemophiliacs were killed on the NHS. There is gross negligence, there are signs of questionable activity, and there's acres of shredded documents. When things are missing, sometimes it's worth asking why. That's where the root to this information lay and lies. There's massive gaps. Let's start with one really interesting one. How did they, prior to having an AIDS test, confirm that blood products were virally inactivated for HIV/AIDS before they had an AIDS test? I've asked that question of doctors, experts in the field. Nobody gives me a straight answer. I was called a dangerous man once for asking it. My suspicion's the answer is really quite simple. Seeing nobody would give them simian subjects, apes, to practice on, and they had no animal model, they did it on us. Now, whatever excuses might be given for doing research on people without their knowledge and consent, it has been detailed from the Nuremberg Code onwards as something that you shouldn't do. A treaty that we not only signed up to, but we were major architects in. When you move on to the fact the government was so clear about its liability by the late 1970s involving blood products that it hid behind the cloak of Crown immunity, despite the fact it knew from 1981 onwards that it didn't actually have Crown immunity to protect it from the absence of licences to manufacture blood products at the PFC in Edinburgh. So, you get these little messy trails of information that doesn't add up. You either come to the conclusion that you've got criminal practice or negligent practice in many cases, because most of the other explanations don't stand up. Now, people are allowed to make mistakes, but we're not talking about an oops. We're talking about something on a much grander scale. We're talking about something that carried on for decades, and not everybody was making mistakes. Not everybody is even that innocent. Negligence, as I say, is the least charge that anybody should be facing on this. In the case of others, I would like to see a court make up its mind for us to get our day like the Hillsborough victims, for all those dead men and boys to get listened to again. I would have thought more than our Article 2 rights have been violated in our lifetimes. Haemophiliacs were by genetic definition used for research in a way that no other patient in the NHS was used. The way that they exploited our viral exposures, understated the risk to patients, and made careers on infections that we caught, leaves the whole thing so dirty that there is only one solution. The UK needs a full and complete Hillsborough-style public inquiry into contaminated blood. But this should not be used as a delaying tactic to avoid paying out decent support for victims going forward. And if it finds against the state, it must be seen as a platform for paying damages thereafter. Personally, I think we should start paying damages now and stop taking the mickey. Nicola? Because we've gone way past the point where Penrose is a credible defence. We've gone way past the point where the narrative of, oops, it's an accident, really sticks. So this shameful mess drags on, and some of us are struggling to drag on with it. I'm not doing that great myself. I'm sitting on the floor because standing up's not really an option at the moment. It seems to me that the civil service main game was to always see us out, to either bankrupt us or see us in our graves. They may as yet be successful, but it's my hope that the Scottish Parliament will have the guts to actually say what's obvious. What happened to haemophiliacs is unconscionable. It should never have happened. And what should not continue is enforced sufferance on those who were genetically defined as such, or their families, because of the actions of state. It's time to act, and it's time to act quickly. Beyond that, Westminster, you always live down to my lowest expectations. I really think that there's things crawling on the ground of higher moral standards than you do. But you must realise that the narrative's not holding. In the case of haemophilia, the level of evidence that exists to suggest that Hillsborough is but a pimple on the boil that is us. So it's time, if you're decent, to take cognizance of the fact that haemophiliacs were murdered on the NHS. The government has covered it up. The government has consistently covered it up, whether it be Labour or Tory. What we need now is people with the guts to actually say, do you know what, this isn't good enough, we need to stop it. We can't sentence our families to decades worth of campaigning anymore. We're dead in our feet. We'll end up winning this to an empty room, nobody left. It needs to end if there's going to be any credibility in a British politic.